What's up, guys? Coach Andrew Simmons back here with you for segment number 6 of Jog Your Mind, a champion's mindset. And we're not going to actually talk today about any of the chess that comes with racing or any of that in terms of specific tactics. Instead, we're going to talk all about champion's mindset. Now, to many of you, you think champion, fast people. This isn't an episode for me. I don't run fast enough. It doesn't matter. The reality is that a champion is somebody who has a purpose and has an understanding of why they are there and what they need to do to be their best. And so the reality is that you have many, many things that are tugging at you when it comes to being a student athlete. You're going to be asked to, do hours of homework plus the play, plus all this stuff for homecoming and choosing, getting clothes and, doing all this stuff that comes with being a high school athlete. The same goes for adults. There are going to be many, many things that are tugging at you. And to be a true champion and to have the mindset of a champion requires that you seek balance. Now, what I want to talk about today is a little bit of answering one question that came in from an athlete and a listener. And it talks all about how to find calm at the start of a race. And so I believe the champion's mindset plays in here, but it also plays in because of something really, really cool in our brains. Our brains are wonderful prediction machines and machines. And our brains, ultimately at the end of the day, are just feeding off of different chemicals that we produce because of what we're interpreting. We take in with our eyes and we are predicting what's going to happen next. And what happens is we have these neuroreceptors, and when they see dopamine, most of you know dopamine from pleasure. If you think about dopamine, it is about motivation and expectation. And when we think about motivation and expectation, or even anticipation, we are looking at how do we get that next little dopamine hit. And when you're scrolling through your phone, you find something that makes you laugh and you go, haha. And you keep scrolling until you get another haha, until either something sidetracks you or you actually have to do some work. The same thing goes when it comes to dopamine at the start of a race. I think about athletes and think back to Liberty Bell recently. And I watched athletes, took some photos and some video. And the athletes that were the most calm often removed themselves a little bit from the start line, either off the back or towards the front. And they went through their pre-race routine, and they had one. It's key. But they did it at about 1/8 of the speed, but with 100% of the accuracy that they needed to do it with. I watched athletes zip by them. I mean, some kids were doing like 15 strides, way too many. And others were doing their warm-ups and drills at like Mach 5. And the people that were there to do some serious work and do some damage on the rest of the field, they would do A-skips, they'd come back, maybe take a little sip of water, roll out. And there was just such a sense of calm and understanding. And you could see that throughout. Things did speed up a little bit, but they were in 100% control of that dopamine that was coming in. They weren't just letting that dopamine dump into their brain and letting their thoughts run wild. I often saw these athletes close their eyes, saw them take a nice deep breath in, breathe out, and bring themselves and recenter themselves. And I believe that when you look at a champion and a champion's mindset, you can find out who they are at the start line by who is the most calm, because the anticipation and motivation that they're getting from dopamine is they're seeing their success. But it was not always the athletes that performed the best. They didn't win the races all the time. They PR'd or they performed well. Some of these athletes I know, some of these athletes I've coached, and some of these athletes I don't watch or coach all that often. But when I see it, I know it. And I could see that they had control over themselves. And I also got to see the excitement of them finish at the finish line. And so if you are someone that wants the champion's mindset or wants to develop it, the first thing you have to do is develop a sense of control, create patterns, and create rhythms. But I'm going to talk about a couple things today that I think are key to developing that champion's mindset long before you get to that start line. And the first one comes to purpose. Purpose is, without a doubt, the number one most important thing that you must have as an athlete to achieve success, because otherwise, what are you trying to go after? Your purpose, your why, is the thing that's going to drive you out of bed in the morning on a cold day in between seasons to get in the miles that you need to get in because you've got all sorts of stuff happening after school. Or it's getting in the miles because you've got another sport. I talk all about that at the bottom of the blog if you guys are looking for more information about how to manage being a dual sport athlete. I come back. A champion's mindset and a purpose go hand in hand because it's a really long game that you're playing, and your purpose needs to be big. It needs to be something that is bigger than you. It could be your dream to go to college and run. It could be to break under the school record. It could be to fulfill, anything from, following in your father's footsteps, your mother's footsteps, your brother's, taking down, something very personal to you. Could be PRs and saying, by the end of the season, I want this, but it's bigger because that's going to give me the opportunity to go to college or become a pro, or whatever your big vision and view. That is your why. That is your purpose. And you need to be so connected to it, because when things get hard, it's what you have to come back to. Now, there's a really good Nietzsche quote that says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." So it's not about how the work gets done or what you must do, but because you have a purpose, you are willing to do it. And that's very, very important, because the game that you're playing is super long. And so the second thing that a champion's mindset requires is the understanding of delayed gratification. This is a really long game. I know I'm talking to distance runners right now, and heck, even if you're a sprinter, the game that you're playing is a really, really long one. You doing, conditioning now to get ready for outdoor season in 9 months, that requires an immense amount of dedication and an immense amount of purpose and understanding of what you really want. A champion's mindset requires that they understand delayed gratification, above all else, is what is going to get you where you want to go. Because the dream you have, if it's fulfilled in a week, it's no longer motivating. If it's fulfilled in months and years, or many, many years and decades, if it's the Olympics or whatever it might be, it requires that you are so in tune with your purpose and your focus that you'll be able to go through just about anything to get it done. The third thing here is talking about worthy rivals. I can distinctly remember talking to my cabin at high altitude camp this year all about what a worthy rival really is. A worthy rival is something or someone that requires you to be at your best and has maybe even bested you in the past. Most of you will think of an opponent or opponents that you come up against at rival schools, but it could be a specific situation. It could be a specific course or something that asks you to be your best or challenges all of your weaknesses. You might be wonderful on a flat and fast course, but when it comes to hills and rollers, you just, struggle there. And if you want to do well there, and maybe that's the one that decides a whole lot this year on that course or a course much like it, are you going to be at your best? Because the course isn't going to change. It's not going to fold for you. So you have to rise up for it. It means that you have to align everything to get it right. And sometimes you're going to come up short. But I think the thing above all else is that a champion understands how to manage their emotions. Think back to that start line analogy from the start of this. Cool, calm, and collected. They don't let small things get the best of them. And when they realize that they're overanalyzing something or that it's eating away at them, they're willing to ask themselves why. So the fourth thing here, because we talked all about having a purpose, we talked about delayed gratification, and we've talked about worthy rivals. I'm going to talk about two opponents that fall into that worthy rival thing, just for a brief moment. The fear of failure and the fear of judgment are the underlying reasons why athletes struggle to perform and have a poor self-interpretation of who they are, because they believe that if they don't perform well, that they will be judged. They do not want to fail. But the reality is that as an athlete, that once you learn how to control these two things, the fear of failure and the fear of judgment, and you don't let that dopamine in your brain run wild, and you can anticipate and see yourself succeeding and going through the visualization and having the routine, doing the little work and making time for all the little things and asking yourself why and journaling, all of that is what defeats the fear of failure and the fear of judgment. It doesn't mean that they go away forever. It means that if you keep doing what you're doing and you keep moving in the right direction and taking steps to do so, those things will affect you less and less and less. Which brings me to my final point. The exercise that I have for you guys today is all about understanding what's really important. So let's think about this. Who gets to decide what success means? How do you define success? And what's really important to you? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be tugged in a lot of different directions, whether that's clubs or another team, or multiple friend groups, or just commitments that you've made. How do you prioritize those things, right? As I said, talk all about how to be a dual sport athlete in this blog post, as well as giving you guys an exercise to understand and help you prioritize what's important to you, how to prioritize it, and even how to communicate when you need to create a boundary and when you need to be able to be yourself as an athlete and shut out some other things and focus on what you need to do to succeed. That's all I've got for today's episode number 6, A Champion's Mindset. I hope this was helpful. I hope this maybe gave you guys something to think about. I think that exercise is super important because it helps you understand what you need to focus on, what needs to go, and maybe even help you identify some of your blind spots so you can get even better this season. And I'm actually going to answer one of our questions that comes in. I really appreciate when you guys send me any email that asks questions. And this one actually comes from an athlete that has attended our high altitude camp, and she's a listener here. And she asks, should you race a 5K every week? I'm not as fast as I normally am since I healed from my 7-month injury in June. So should I race more to get my time down / more opportunities to race? Or will it lead to early burnout and peaking mid-season? It's a really good question. And without having a lot of knowledge about how much training that athlete's been able to get in, this is kind of a tough one to answer. That athlete's been able to get a good base of mileage, you can resume normal racing and race either weekly or bi-weekly without really, burning yourself out and peaking mid-season. Now, if you're just picking up your training now, my best advice is to actually take off some of the front of that season. Maybe race once to see where you are, and then use a number of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, to build up your mileage and build some confidence with workouts. Because what you're up against is that fear of failure and fear of judgment that we just talked about, and the inability to trust yourself as you come back from an injury because you don't know where you are and you don't know what you're capable of. And so without having a chance to test it, you don't know, but it also feels a lot safer to not know because you don't want to get bad news. And so when it comes to this, I think what's really important is progress your season. If you can, maybe even extend your season into the club season and choose your number of races widely to avoid burning out. If you're confined simply to the high school season and the opportunities that exist there, I would definitely do an early season race. And then from there, take a little bit of time, race, check in, and see where you are. There should be a number of races, hopefully, that exist in your area, either with clubs or with other opportunities like Running Lane, Nike Cross, or Foot Locker, to be able to give you chances to race at a high competition level with a lot more chance to train later into November and December. That's all I've got for you guys today on segment number 6. Super excited for what segment number 7 has. I know this one was a little bit different than what we normally do and had a little bit of extra here. But if you guys have questions, shoot them over to me, Andrew at peakperformrun.com. And that is a great way to get a hold of me. Ask your questions, fire away. I will do my best to answer as many of them as I can live here on the pod. I'll see you guys next week for segment number 7. Bye.